Now, just how is the science community reacting to Brexit and the latest from the Brexit negotiations? Joining me is Rob Davidson, Chief Executive Director and co-founder of Scientist4EU. A policy paper came out today regarding how the government is going to approach negotiations in terms of EU science and research. Rob, just briefly, what is your reaction to it so far?
It's a future relationship paper. The government's been producing quite a lot of them recently, and it's been throwing these things out there as if it has ideas. But like all the other position papers and future relationship papers to date, it is empty, basically.
It's when you say empty,
it's full of enthusiasm, but it's got no solutions. So they follow a very simple pattern, all of these position papers, which is sing the praises of the EU, way more than you'd expect the Brexit government to do. Declare a desire for a deep relationship with the EU moving forward. State clearly that you're breaking the relationship, and then finally you ask for creative solutions from someone else to help you get through this. And that's what's happened today.
And so when you say there is literally nothing in there, do you mean that there is, apart from the words of enthusiasm, the words of, you know, acknowledging the EU's capabilities and what it offers, there is actually nothing practical you can see genuine in that policy proposal?
Yeah, absolutely. So it sings the praises of the EU. It lists lots of examples of how the EU and the UK have worked amazingly well together. And then it asks for a dialogue on how we could make this happen.
Well, let's pick up on that dialogue. Have you or your organisation or anyone around your organisation been consulted by the government, by particularly the Department of Leaving the EU, on the policy paper before it came out?
Oh, we certainly weren't asked for input on this policy paper. The Department for Exiting the EU has been bringing people in. Industry bodies hasn't been so interested in speaking to us. We've been speaking to other government departments and other ministers. So we have had some input there. But famously, the Department for Exiting the EU has been bringing people in and telling them it doesn't want to hear any dissent or negatives, it just wants positives.
And then you've heard that from, is that from people who
have actually been invited in, yes.
Is that by scientists?
Yes.
And so, so when you just go through that, they would walk in and they would come with ideas or problems or challenges, and
yeah. So before they would go, they would be given a subtle hint that no negatives will be heard here. If you have negatives, then you're not coming back. And so the scientists, the one in particular that reported this to us, said that he didn't turn up to the meeting in the end because he felt there was no point in just nodding along and going, yeah, it'll be great.
And when perhaps it was suggested that they need to take on these challenges, which the scientists have identified, they were met with absolutely nothing in terms of, did he feel that it would be futile for him to try?
Well, this is it. As I say, he decided it was futile to turn up because he didn't feel that he could give a clear message on any positives if he couldn't also put the caveats in which were sufficiently negative.
So, in terms of your organisation, in terms of you and the people you work with, are you disappointed with this policy paper?
Yes. I mean, we're not surprised because, as I say, if you look at any of the other position papers they've released in the last 2 weeks or so, the Irish paper, the paper that discussed the border in Ireland, was exactly the same. It was full of broad enthusiasm, love for the EU, the regulations, the customs union, everything, etc., etc. We're going to break that. We're not sure how to fix it. Maybe someone has some ideas.
In terms of what the government has said they're prepared to negotiate, the BBC certainly today are reporting that they're prepared to negotiate continued membership of the European Union's research funding bodies after exiting the EU. That in itself is surely a positive step forward, in that it's acknowledged that they want to maintain some degree of relationship between...
Absolutely. The Brexit, it's great that they want to be part of this, but... so Brexit advocates, during the referendum debate, always said, well, of course we'd love to be part of EU science. Science is great. And the Brexit government has said, well, of course we want to be part of this. It's great. But there are two key issues here. There are two red lines set by the Brexit government. One is that we will no longer be part under the jurisdiction of the ECJ. They keep saying that. The other is that we're restricting freedom of movement. And both of these mean that we're not going to be able to participate in the core EU science programmes.
So, and those are two elements which you have to be compliant with in order to do any, is that in order to gain any kind of scientific cooperation in terms of research?
So the main science programmes, the current programme is Horizon 2020, the next one is Framework 9, or that's what the working title is. And in order to apply for any of the bidding processes, you have to sign, your investigator has to sign that your local government would be happy to be under the jurisdiction of the ECJ, and all we're getting from the government is that's not on. So we wouldn't be able to fill out the application forms to join those, even if we were paying money to be part of those programmes. We wouldn't be able to actually go through the process.
So surely then the inevitability is, regardless of the enthusiasm, regardless of the policy paper, the red lines mean it is inevitable that the EU and the UK cannot continue the same or anywhere near the same kind of...
Absolutely.
I mean, how are you... have you accepted that? Do you think the science community has kind of accepted the fact that it's not going to happen?
Well, it's really hard to tell. The government goes through so many U-turns, and we would fully welcome and applaud them for a U-turn on these issues. They could, for example, offer a dispensation for science, perhaps, that we would be allowed to be under the jurisdiction of the EU, of the ECJ, the European Court of Justice. But when they floated that idea for the EU's Unified Patent Agreement, there was massive backlash in the Brexit tabloids. And the main Brexit campaigners like Leave.eu, they said this was remaining jurisdiction by the back door and so on. And the question is, once you have, say you did have dispensation for science, where any researcher could be under the jurisdiction of the EU, how many other sectors would end up asking for that, and how many would be given? And then there really would be a question of have we ever left the ECJ.
So in terms of yourself and your personal opinion, from what you've heard, from what you've absorbed from people involved in in crafting the policy paper so far, or at least have been approached to write some of the policy paper or assist in it, do you think in the current situation, the political climate, it is unlikely that the UK will secure any kind of continued agreement with the research bodies?
There are other programmes. So there are other European-wide programmes like CERN, the famous Large Hadron Collider, and the Galileo and Copernicus projects that are to do with space research and the GPS satellites. We might be able to buy in to one or two of those, but it seems highly unlikely we would be able to participate. Within the UK government's current position, it is highly unlikely we won't be able to buy ourselves back into the main core programmes of the EU's science.
Rob Davidson, thank you very much.